Well, I got to tell you, it was another beautiful day here at Rancho Costa Verde in San Felipe, like always. And you know what? It was such a beautiful night. It's really hard to turn in and hit the sack. So I thought I'd use the beautiful moon of the Baja moon over the Sea of Cortez in our own backyard to start talking a bit about what to expect in the process of buying your own little piece of this paradise. But before I do, as usual, there's a caveat. There's two different ways to go about buying property down here. There's either private party or reputable developer or real estate agent. And you're going to have two completely different trust levels with these people. You see, as I've said before, there's no regulation down here. Nobody's licensed. And not when it comes to real estate, except dealing with attorneys who have a regulated trust account. Anyone can call themselves a realtor. You can hang out a shingle tomorrow and start selling homes if you want. And because of that, there's no repercussions if something goes south. No incentive to not mislead you or to steal from you or lie to you or try and cheat you. Now, I'm not saying everybody's that way, but what I am saying is that you really need to stick to well-experienced people with long, proven track records to help you. People who have invested in their reputations, and they've got a great deal to lose if they don't treat you correctly. People like, I don't know, Joanne Forcum comes to mind in Tulum, or Yatzon Legaspi in Cancun, or really anywhere in Mexico. She's very good. Or major realty corporations like Sotheby's in Mexico City, Century 21 in Playa del Carmen, for example, Coldwell Banker, CBRE, really anywhere. Or Joyce, my wife, if you think our little piece of paradise down here at Rancho Costa Verde on the Sea of Cortez, the quiet part of Baja, might be your style. These people, as I said, have a great deal of time and experience invested in their names and their reputations, and their careers rest literally on every single sale that they make. Every home they represent is their word. I got to tell you, there's a world of difference in who represents your interest down here and what you can expect. So, with all that said, forearmed is forewarned, or whatever this saying is. Let's talk about what you can expect when buying property down here. So the first thing you're going to see is something called an oferta, or an offer and acceptance, but we'll just call it an ONA. Now this document is really nothing more than, I don't know, a preliminary agreement that contains basic information about you, the seller, the property, and it's a worksheet of sorts that outlines the generalities of the next document, which is called a purchase agreement, or contrato de promesa. Now, people call that document different things, like a reserved title agreement or a realty trust agreement, which it really isn't because that's what a fideicomiso is. But for simplicity, let's just go with purchase agreement. It's easier. Now, generally speaking, you're not going to see anyone buying property outside of the restricted zone, or Mexican nationals really anywhere, using a promissory agreement because, well, one simple reason. There's not going to be a time delay between the time you make an offer on the property and the escrituras publicas, or deed, can be transferred from the seller to the buyer. But in any transaction where the actual transfer of this title is delayed for more than, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks, let's say if the buyer needs to settle financing, or the foreigner needs fideicomiso inside a restricted zone. If there's going to be a time difference of more than a couple of weeks, then you got to use a promissory agreement. It should be mandatory. Now, as always, there's a rather exhaustive point-by-point outline on the website that goes into detail about all these procedures. And I urge you to consult it for deeper understanding. So with that said, let's move on to the purchase agreement. Now, while the ONA isn't a binding agreement, the purchase agreement is. It's a contract. Because it, as we say, produces or transfers obligations and rights between the parties, legality. And that creates a binding agreement, whether it's here in Mexico or in the U.S. So when you sign it, you really need to know what you're signing because it is a binding agreement. Okay, so what exactly is the purchase agreement? Well, unlike the ONA, which again deals in generalities, the purchase agreement is going to outline exactly what has to happen for you to take legal title of the property. Everything. What you're going to do, what the seller is going to do, what the government has to do through, of course, lost the term, notario, through its notario. All this to enable you to take legal possession of the property. Perhaps not physical possession. You can take that anytime the seller agrees, but legal possession. To be able to call it your property, and that's what you want. You're buying down here. Now, first and foremost in this agreement, you're going to see something, and it's going to be hidden a few page clauses down the list, but you're going to see something called earnest money deposit. Now, this is the money you're going to need to pay the seller to make it worth his or her time to take the property off the market while you're getting all your affairs in order, money and everything else. It's a security blanket, so to speak, that says you're serious about the purchase. Now, I want to spend a couple minutes talking about this because it's important. Two things here. First, since there's no such thing as escrow down here in Mexico, people usually just hand a sum of money over to the seller, or more typically his agent, to satisfy this earnest money clause, believing that somehow if the deal doesn't get done, you're going to get it back. You're not. Remember, real estate transactions down here, they aren't regulated. Nobody's licensed. So when you hand that money over, you might as well kiss it goodbye because it's not coming back. So to combat that, do this. Either offer a small amount of money, something you can afford to lose, or what I always suggest is require it to be placed into an attorney's or licensed real estate broker's trust account, somebody in the U.S. and the state that you live in, with a mirror clause in the O&A or purchase agreement that the deposit is refundable in the event that the deal can't close because of something that the seller did or didn't do. A breach of contract, some kind of breach on the part of the seller, a material misrepresentation, something that's known or unknown at the time the deal was done about the property, anything that isn't the fault of the buyer or may be the fault of the buyer, if, for example, financing falls through, or something that's out of the control of the buyer or unknown to the buyer at the time the agreement was executed. Simple as that. And if the seller balks or refuses this, there's something wrong. As I've said before, this is poker. Walk right out the door. Because remember, your position always has to be that the seller needs to sell his property to you more than you need to buy it. Always, no matter what. And these are called escape clauses. And they're absolutely necessary, complete with what are called release provisions, which make it clear that the money will be refunded if things don't happen, or if they don't happen within a certain amount of time, like, I don't know, having everything reviewed by your counsel. Things are always going to come up in the end that you didn't think about it when you were doing the document. They were unforeseen, and so they weren't written into the offer. And this can and will cause problems. It always does. And it can possibly lead to the result of the loss of your deposit. So you should always insist that you be given a reasonable amount of time to investigate the property, investigate the situation, and maybe have your attorney or your counsel go over the document before the earnest money deposit becomes non-refundable. Something like, 2 weeks. 30 days is even better. And again, not to belabor the point, but with reputable, well-established developers or sellers, this isn't going to be a problem. They've done this thousands of times. So, back on track. So once all these issues surrounding the property are considered and noted in the O&A or purchase agreement, you can now start to complete the purchase agreement. And this really should be done by your own counsel, or at the very least by the seller, if, like I said, it's a reputable, well-established developer or real estate company with a verifiable track record, something in excess of, 5 years. 10 years is even better. These people are not going to lie to you or hide anything from you or try and pull the proverbial wool over your eyes. For what? A simple, single, solitary sale of a property when they have hundreds and thousands of other sales riding on their reputation? Not a chance. Respectfully, none of us are worth that to them. And because these people are proven and don't have any problems over thousands of times they've done this, hundreds of times maybe, they're going to have all these documents already prepared in their computers and ready for your specific clauses just to be included. They'll just type it into them. And they'll have an English language counterpart, so you can understand exactly what you're reading and being asked to sign, and that's important. You want it in English. As I said, remember, no matter if it's a single home someone's trying to sell you or a well-established developer, makes no difference. To some extent, this is always poker. And except for the well-established developers whose reputations, as I said, ride on every single sale, these sellers are not your friends. They're hiding behind those Cheshire cat grins, as my father used to say. They're other poker players. So read the expressions on their faces as well and as studied as you read your own child's faces when they're saying, "But Dad, it wasn't me, it was the dog. I swear, I saw him." Believe me, look in their eyes. You'll know what's real and what's right off the cuff. And you know pretty much where you stand. And here's another little gem for you. That agreement you're signing, it'll typically have a fee for it included in the closing costs for this service that you'll be expected to pay in the end. And it's going to read something like escrow fee or something like that. Don't fall for it. I mean, think about it. Why would you pay this guy to hold your money? And the seller's arguments, I've heard them a million times. They're always the same. It's either, well, it's required by law. It's not. Or, well, we have to hire an escrow company to provide this service. And what should your answer be? Same as mine. Fine. So hire him. But don't charge me just because you don't have your own licensed attorney with his or her trust account to hold my money. It's ridiculous. You pay for it. And again, this is poker. He needs to be reminded that he needs to sell more than you need to buy. It's just part of doing business. Okay, so what's next? Well, a little bit more of a purchase agreement. And then it's on to the notario, which is a government requirement in all Mexico real estate transactions. But as always, I've got to ask you again, please hit the like button. It's really the only way that other people will ever know that we're here to help them understand what's involved in coming down here without being charged an arm and a leg for the council. Remember, we don't make anything from this channel. We don't charge anyone for it. And your likes are really the only thing that keeps it from being really a big waste of time. I hate to put it that way, but we're depending on you. There's a lot of folks out there who are counting on us, you and us, you to spread the word, and us to continue delivering the accurate, current, and reliable information that we do here.